just overall health and longevity of us humans. And obviously we're not going to live forever, but the way I look at it is I want to have the highest quality of life I can have while I'm alive. If I live to be 80, I would like to still have a high quality of life when it comes to just being able to enjoy it, being able to move around and not being ate up with pain and physical problems, mental problems. And so, we know quite a bit about human biology, and this is something that we've been studying as long as we've been humans, I believe, as long as we've been in existence. And so, I've taken biology, human anatomy, and physiology 1 and 2, and of course, biology of plants, botany, and other things as well. And then, of course, I've studied nutrition and as much as I can about just how our bodies function, and from 30 years of paying attention to my own body and trying to improve it or maintain my health. I've learned a lot, at least about my own body, and how it reacts to different things, and the things I can do to make myself feel good besides take a drug, which we've all gotten to this idea that we just take something to fix a problem instead of actually taking an action or doing something different, or stopping something. We just decide to take something else, and it's great. It makes you feel good for a minute, but it just in the end it'll ultimately create more problems. And so it's really kind of ridiculously stupid how we live. We eat junk food. The majority, especially here in the United States, most people eat junk food. It's just 80% of the supermarket is mostly trash. It's being displayed. It has cool packaging, and it looks, it has cool names like organics and all these names that make it sound healthy. But the fact is most of that stuff is slowly killing us. It's not good for us, especially when we combine it with the lifestyle that doesn't really have exercise, or if you're sitting in front of a desk for 8 hours a day, and then you go home and sit in front of a TV and you eat junk, and it doesn't take long for you have to pay for those things, and the funny thing is we can spend, we invest so many we invest in so many bad things for ourselves continuously, and some things are hard to start, like smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol. When I was young and the first time I tried those things, they were horrible. It was I had to force myself to do it. I didn't like it. No one likes smoking cigarettes or drinking beer whenever the first time they do it. It's just almost impossible, unless maybe you're kind of fed it as a child, as a young child, and it's just, but that's something that you have to get used to, and it takes time. And the funny thing is, we work hard to create a problem for ourselves, and then later on we want to stop it, but we can't, because we spent so much time investing in it and making it part of our lives. Whereas we could do that with many other things. If you do the same thing with exercise and eating right, if you do that long enough, it'll become a habit, and it's addicting. And you crave it. If are used to eating good food and used to how it makes you feel, then you crave that, and if you don't have it, you want it. Same thing with going to the gym and exercise. I mean, you start to like it because it pays off. So a lot of times, it doesn't pay off right away, like a drug or like food or whatever. But the exercise, it pays off, and once you see that, it's just like education. So many things that if you at first it seems hard and like it's not really helping, but if you do it over and over again, eventually it pays off. And once you see how much it pays you, instead of you having to pay for it like you will if you do other things that are bad for you. If you do things bad for you, you ultimately will have to pay for them. If you do good things, if you invest in good things for yourself, then normally they will pay you. If you take care of your body with exercise and good food, I mean, we are what we consume, what we eat, whether it's what we read, listen to, watch, these are the things we consume, whether it's information or whether it's, food, and so obviously the higher quality stuff we consume, the higher quality being we're going to be. It's really pretty simple. And, like a very small, like 20 minutes of exercise a day is such a huge investment in your overall life. And yet we refuse to do that. We'll sit around and waste hours out of the day and, and then later on complain that we don't feel good. People will spend their whole life, if you spend 40 years, or however long, let's say you spend 20 years working in an office, doing the same routine, no exercise, eating crap food, not taking care of yourself mentally, not educating, we get this idea that we just need to stop learning, after we graduate school or whatever. And most of the time what we learn, like especially in high school and whatnot, grade school, we it's just useless. And so, but then suddenly we're done learning. It doesn't make any sense, and we haven't even learned how to navigate the world, and we've graduated, so we don't have to learn anymore. It's just people. So you spend the next 20 years just fucking with scrolling and basically just rotting your own brain, and not taking care of yourself. And then after, you get to retirement age, or you're not even there yet, you get to like 40, and you wonder what's wrong. You have all these problems. You're overweight, you're out of shape, you can't do all these things, you got high blood pressure, you got all these freaking problems because that's how you invested in yourself. It could be the other way. The people that there's the other example as well. The people that have taken really good care of themselves, and the people that have continued to learn and to continue to grow and continue to, improve. That's why we can be 50 years old and be in great shape. And if it's just the investment you make. I mean, of course there's things we can't control. If you get ran over by a car, that will affect how good a shape you're in. But as far as just everything else equal, if we're just about taking care of ourselves, it's obvious that the person that's self-disciplined, creates good habits, works out, exercises, stretches, educates themselves, eats well, does all these things. I mean, the more we learn about the world, the more we learn how things work, the more control we have, and instead of just wondering like, oh, what the hell's wrong with me, some things it's just obvious, but we refuse to just accept the answer. I see so many people doing it. you know, it's like, you know, I have a neighbor, and she was talking about, you know, she's gaining weight, and she was blaming it on all these things, but on the simple fact that she's just eating too much and she's not exercising. You know, she's not getting enough activity. She's eating more than her body can use, and you know, and it's not good food on top of that. And so, you know, and she's not exercising, and she's, you know, smoking cigarettes, and she's smoking marijuana, and she drinks, and you know, and so then it's just like, but her idea of of what's the problem is it's her boyfriend, or it's the, you know, the cost of food, or it's you know, there's excuses for everything, instead of just saying, look, I eat shit, I don't exercise, you know, I don't take care of myself. That's the fucking problem, you know. If you know, and then you think, I've been looking at taking this medication or this pill, and then, well, you know, now you've created a problem for yourself, and you don't want to do the same thing that it took to create the problem, which means you got to do something different every day. You know, just like you started smoking cigarettes, and you do that every day now. Well, you have to, you know, stop doing that and add in something else. You know, it's just and it's a slow process, and it's also it's a lifestyle. It's, you know, this whole idea that you're just gonna get to this point and then it's done and your work's done it's false. It doesn't work like that. You know, I mean, you can lose weight and you'll gain it right back if you change. That's why it's not, you don't look for some magic thing like a pill or a special diet or whatever kind of stupid ass shit somebody tries to sell you. You know, you just look at fucking the way things work. Just take a biology course, you know, just think about what you're eating. It's really simple shit, you know. Eat good shit and don't eat too much of it, and be active, exercise, stretch, do all these things that our body needs, and man, you'll be amazed at how great you feel and how much productive you are, and how, you know, how much longer you live, and how fewer problems you have, you know. And I mean, it's really that simple, but for some reason we can't figure it out, you know, and we don't teach that in school. Why? I mean, really, if you could just learn how to take care of yourself, that's all you need to learn in school. All this, you don't need to learn about presidents and dates and all this fucking information. The information is good at some point, maybe, if you need it, you know, if you want to know these things, but you know, you just learn to take care of yourself. Learn to take care of yourself so everyone else doesn't have to take care of you. And then, man, think about how much greater everything would be. And, you know, instead of trying to deceive each other and sell each other things that we know aren't good, instead of trying to do bad things to gain, why not do the opposite? You know, I mean, it's way more fulfilling, and then you have nothing to hide, and then life is so much better for everybody. But that's me driving. That's my Tesla talks for today. There you go.